On the morning of the 4th of November 2018, in the wealthy suburbs of Forsyth County, Georgia, a 40-year-old mother of 5 was found dead in the backyard of a home following an adult sleepover. The official police narrative claims that Tamla Horsford simply drank too much, stumbled over a second-story balcony, and died from a tragic accidental fall. But the impossible geometry of her injuries and the digital footprints of the partygoers tell a terrifyingly different story, one of violence, moved bodies, and a cover-up orchestrated by the very people sworn to investigate it. When the homeowner's boyfriend was caught illegally using the county's internal police databases to monitor the investigation, the local sheriff's department didn't arrest him. They quietly swept it under the rug. Today, we are going to tear apart the impossibilities of Tamla Horsford's autopsy, expose the agonizing and highly suspicious delay in her 911 call, and reveal exactly how a heavily connected circle of suburban elites manipulated a small-town justice system to get away with murder. Tamla Horsford was a radiant, deeply loved 40-year-old black woman, a dedicated mother to 5 boys, and a fixture in her community. On the evening of the 3rd of November 2018, she attended an adult sleepover, a birthday celebration for a fellow football mom in Cumming, Georgia. There were 12 women and 2 men at the house that night. Tamla was the only black woman in attendance. According to the stories later told to the police, the night was entirely unremarkable. Drinks were poured, games were played, and by 2 in the morning, the attendees began to filter off to bed. The homeowner claimed she saw Tamla at around 2 in the morning, awake, making a late-night snack in the kitchen. What happened over the next 6 hours is a black hole of missing evidence, shifting testimonies, and catastrophic police negligence. At roughly 8:45 inches the morning, the homeowner's aunt supposedly looked out a window and saw Tamla lying face down in the backyard, motionless in the grass. In any normal scenario, the discovery of an unresponsive friend in your backyard triggers sheer panic. You scream, you run outside, you violently shake them, desperately checking for a pulse, and you dial 911 with shaking hands. But that is not what happened at this house. When the 911 call was finally placed at 8:59 a.m., the tone of the caller was chillingly calm. There was no panic. There was no screaming in the background. The caller casually informed the dispatcher that a woman was lying face down in the yard and was stiff. The dispatcher, confused by the utter lack of urgency, had to press for details. The caller then stated they had not actually gone down to check on her. They were simply looking from the balcony. Think about the psychological reality of that moment. A group of adults sees their friend lying face down in the cold morning grass, stiff and unmoving. And their first instinct is not to rush to her aid. Their first instinct is to stay away from the body. It is the behavior of people who already know exactly what they are looking at, and more importantly, people who do not want to get their DNA or footprints near a crime scene. When the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office arrived, the systemic failure began immediately. From the very first second boots hit the grass, the scene was treated not as a potential homicide, but as an inconvenience. Deputies did not tape off the house. They did not separate the 14 adults to prevent them from getting their stories straight. They did not secure the premises, and they did not lock down the digital evidence. The lead investigator looked at the balcony, looked at the body, and instantly decided it was an accidental fall. This immediate rush to write off Tamla's death as an accident allowed crucial, irretrievable evidence to vanish. Let us look at the physical impossibilities of the crime scene, impossibilities the police actively chose to ignore. Tamla was found lying face down. The balcony was 14 feet above the ground. If she had fallen, struck the ground, and died instantly from the impact, there would have been a significant impact crater in the soft soil. There was none. If she had fallen, struck the ground, and bled out, there would have been a massive pooling of blood soaking into the dirt beneath her body. There was no blood on the grass. None. How does a human being suffer catastrophic, fatal injuries from a 14-foot drop, yet leave no trace of blood on the ground where she supposedly lay for 6 hours? Forensic experts who later reviewed the case pointed out the terrifying reality. Bodies that bleed out leave stains. If there is no stain where the body is found, the body was not bleeding there. It was bleeding somewhere else, and it was moved. This brings us to the autopsy, a document that reads less like a medical evaluation and more like a work of absolute fiction designed to protect the guilty. The initial medical examiner ruled that Tamla died from multiple blunt force injuries caused by an accidental fall, exacerbated by acute alcohol intoxication. But the actual list of her injuries paints a picture of a brutal, hand-to-hand struggle. Tamla suffered severe lacerations to her face and head. She had a broken neck. But most disturbingly, she had a massive laceration to the right ventricle of her heart. A heart laceration from a fall almost universally requires the rib cage to shatter and puncture the organ. Tamla's ribs were intact. Furthermore, she had deep, unexplained puncture wounds on her wrists and severe bruising down her shins. These are not the injuries of a woman who simply tripped over a railing. These are defensive wounds. These are the injuries of a woman who was fighting for her life, whose wrists were grabbed and punctured, whose shins were kicked, and whose heart suffered a massive, blunt force trauma inconsistent with the physics of a 14-foot drop onto soft grass. Yet, the Forsyth County investigators buried their heads in the sand. They had their narrative. She was drunk. She fell. Case closed. This is where the incompetence of local police transforms into a calculated, systemic cover-up. This is the point where the justice system stops being a shield for the innocent and becomes a weapon for the wealthy and connected. Enter Jose Barrera. Barrera was the live-in boyfriend of the homeowner where the party took place. He was in the house that night. But Barrera was not just a random suburban dad. He was employed by the Forsyth County court system as a pretrial services officer. He had deep ties to local law enforcement, deep ties to the judges, and crucially, access to internal, highly restricted police databases. In the days and weeks following Tamla's death, while her grieving husband and 5 sons were begging for answers, Jose Barrera was using his government credentials to illegally log into the police network. He actively accessed the incident reports regarding Tamla's death. He monitored the investigation from the inside. When you are innocent, you do not abuse government databases to spy on the police investigating a dead body in your backyard. You do that when you are managing a cover-up. You do that to see if the cops are getting close to the truth, to see what evidence they have, and to figure out if anyone in your house is about to be indicted. When the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office discovered that Barrera had illegally accessed these files, their response was an absolute insult to the concept of justice. In any other jurisdiction, a suspect in a highly suspicious death who hacks into a police database to view the case files would be immediately arrested for tampering, obstruction of justice, and potentially worse. Their house would be raided. Their electronics would be seized. The Forsyth County Sheriff's Office did none of that. They did not arrest him. They did not secure his computers to see what else he was hiding or communicating. They simply allowed him to be fired from his job, effectively washing their hands of the massive conflict of interest staring them in the face. They protected one of their own at the expense of a dead mother. The impunity is staggering. The police allowed the very people who were present at the time of Tamla's death to dictate the terms of the investigation. They took the word of a house full of heavily intoxicated adults who waited an agonizing amount of time to call 911, and who had the luxury of a court official living under their roof to help them navigate the legal fallout. And what about the security cameras? The house was equipped with a sophisticated home security system. There were cameras that covered the exact area of the backyard where Tamla was supposedly found. When investigators finally bothered to ask for the footage, they were told the cameras were either not working, unplugged, or had failed to capture anything from that specific time frame. It is the oldest, most transparent lie in the true crime playbook. Security cameras work perfectly 364 days a year, but the very night a woman is brutally killed in the backyard, they mysteriously glitch out, and the police simply nodded and accepted this impossible coincidence without ever executing a search warrant to seize the hard drives and have them analyzed by digital forensics experts. The Horsford family, shattered but resilient, refused to accept this parade of lies. They hired an independent medical examiner, Dr. Maurice Godwin, to review the files the police were desperately trying to close. Dr. Godwin's findings completely obliterated the official narrative. He pointed out the total absence of blood at the scene. He highlighted that the rigidity of Tamla's body when she was found, the rigor mortis indicated she had been dead much longer than the timeline the partygoers provided. He explicitly stated that the laceration to her heart, the broken neck, and the defensive wounds on her wrists were indicative of a physical altercation, not a fall. He concluded that Tamla was likely killed somewhere else, perhaps inside the house or on the patio, and her body was later placed in the yard to stage an accident. When presented with this devastating independent analysis, the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office did exactly what corrupt institutions do when backed into a corner. They dug their heels in. They officially closed the case, ruling it an accidental death, and handed the file over to the archives, hoping the world would forget about the black mother of 5 who went to a suburban sleepover and never came home. It was only after massive public outcry, relentless pressure from the family, and the global racial justice movements of 2020 that the Georgia Bureau of Investigation finally agreed to reopen the case. But the damage done by the local police was irreversible. The crime scene had been washed away by time and rain. The digital evidence on phones and hard drives had likely been wiped. The suspects had years to align their stories, hire expensive lawyers, and build a fortress of silence. The handling of Tamla Horsford's death is a masterclass in systemic rot. It is a chilling reminder that the police are not always there to solve a crime. Sometimes, they are there to manage a liability. When the suspects live in large houses, drive nice cars, and work in the county courthouse, the rules of forensic science are suddenly suspended. Blood evidence is ignored. Defensive wounds are relabeled as drunken clumsiness. Missing camera footage is accepted with a smile. Tamla Horsford did not just die from blunt force trauma. She was killed a second time by a sheriff's department that looked at her lifeless body and decided that protecting the comfort of the wealthy people inside that house was more important than delivering justice to her 5 fatherless sons. The people who were in that house on the 3rd of November 2018 know exactly what happened. They know who threw the punch. They know who grabbed her wrists. They know who carried her body out into the dark, cold grass. And they know exactly who told everyone to keep their mouths shut. They walk free today, living their comfortable suburban lives, protected by a badge and a broken system. If you think the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office is the only department willing to protect a well-connected killer by blaming the victim, wait until you hear how a billionaire's family bought an impossible suicide ruling for a woman stuffed down a luxury garbage chute. Click the video on your screen to see the blood-stained cover-up they thought they had buried forever.